for some Bengals news. At the Growler, we got you. Hot takes, interviews from your host, Paul Jr.
All right, welcome into the latest edition of the Growler. Paul Dehner Jr. here with you on a very, very exciting Tuesday. Why is Tuesday so exciting? You might be asking, but if you know, you know. It is the day of the Mock Offseason Sheet Release. The sheets are here, which means my good friends Charlie Goldsmith and Mo Egger are here. Mo, you've printed the sheets. You come fully prepared with the printer having fired. How do you feel? I always want to know. This is always a good barometer for me every year. Did you feel frustrated? Did you feel like it was freeing, gratifying? How'd you feel about it?
Initially frustrated because I couldn't make the big splash acquisition, but I feel pretty comfortable with what I've done here. Like I had a specific objective, and using this exercise, I accomplished it. And no, that specific objective wasn't to cut loose Geno Stone, even though the contract says he can get cut loose. Like, I do wish you would have thrown something in here that allowed me to like pack his bags or fill his gas tank or something. And I couldn't do that on this sheet, but I won't be able to in real life either. So there you go.
I know. I wanted the Geno Stone slot to be in your honor. Just a little emoji of you next to it, doing the X's or something. But I didn't go there. I'll let you do the pleasure when we go through, because we're going through the sheets today. Charlie, how'd you feel about it initially?
I like my team. I don't know if that's a hot take for a team that was like the worst defense in NFL history through 11 games last season. But I'm looking at this team and I'm looking at the AFC and I see, here we go, optimism on January 26th. I see a path.
See a path. Well, for those of you that don't know, you can go to The Athletic right now, go on in and you can download the sheet, make a copy, or if you want to get into Excel, just download the Excel spreadsheet and hop on in and you can pick the team that fits under the Bengals cap. Now, you would say what most people say: the cap's fake. It's not even real. It's not even real money. Oh, contraire. In Cincinnati, this is proven. I have been doing this as year 6. Can't believe it's year 6 of the sheet already. We have kind of tinkered with it each year, but what has been consistent is I've been able to get this cap number that we've come up with each year. And it has largely ended up hitting very, very close to where the Bengals spend ends up being. Most teams don't care about the cap. The Bengals do. They are pretty strict in getting to it and staying and paying right up to it. And this is usually about where that is. You go the effective cap spend or the cap number, you take away about 10 to 12 million, which landed at 35 million for this exercise, which is kind of what's been about an average number. They usually are sitting somewhere in the back end of the top 10 in this 30-some range. That's where they've been almost every year. They are again. So if you think back to spends that they've done in the past, whether you're thinking about the positive ones in 20 and 21 or whatever, or you're thinking about some of the maybe the ones that didn't go so well in recent years, it's been about this number. So you've seen the Bengals and you know that they can attack free agency aggressively with this amount of money, and so we have it. And there's a lot of different directions you can go, notably in fixing the defense. So we're going to get through all of these sheets, which has some new stuff this year, guys. How did we feel about the new draft pick integration?
I'll like it a lot more in a few months when we know a little bit more about these guys. But yeah, I like it more than just third-round draft pick linebacker or second-round draft pick tackle. I like putting a name. And for me, like, it was like the first, if this is what I want to do, if this spreadsheet represents what I want to do in the draft, it gave me names to pay attention to. So I personally liked it.
I liked it as well. It shows you how it really looks. But going off your idea earlier with the Geno Stone thing, that's going to be the next thing for next year, the full immersive experience where you're picking up draft picks from the airport and taking them for visits. You're setting your 30 visit list. Like, I want to see how deep we can go. You're bringing Tyre Tart into the building to see if he's a character fit. Like, let's go all the way deep next year as we go through this process.
You're having to sit in a room with Trey Hendrickson telling him the Bengals have tagged him once more. That's the immersive experience that not everybody's as interested in. It's a lot easier when you can just politely click something on a sheet. All right. We talk about the new draft pick integration. Before we go into it, I do want to give a shout out to Growler listener Bill Guinea, who was the one who's an Excel, Google Sheet wizard and did that. He's like, I can do this. Went in there, did that, put it all together, added in the sheet. Bill, my hat goes to you. Incredible work. The Growl Pal's giving back.
Nice job.
You know what that is? That is incredibly Graeters Worthy. So
yes.
Bill, send me your favorite flavors. And the 6-pack of Graeters pints will be showing up at your front door, paying it forward to you for the hard work that you put in for us, for the Growl Pals, for the sheet lovers. Really, real good stuff right there. So thanks to Bill.
And once the ice cream arrives, you could let it sit outside for seemingly the next 2 months.
Yes.
Don't have to occupy any freezer space. Don't have to clear anything else. Just leave it outside. Take a spoon outside. I mean, what are we doing? Go ahead.
What are we doing? That's where we're at.
Yeah.
All right. Piles of snow outside, which means more people have time with the sheets. No boss looking over shoulder. You're remote all week. It's just you and the sheets. So I think we should dive in, shall we?
Yes.
All right, boys, here is the sheet. And for those of you in the audio version and not watching on YouTube, we'll describe what we're doing and go along with you. But for those of you watching on YouTube, here it is right in front of you. We're going to just go through it. We're going to kind of go in order because I think everything is dependent on another. And you end up in a lot of different spaces and decisions that happen just from one small thing. So we're going to go through it together. At the end, we will each reveal what our sheets looked like. But for now, let's start where we start. Any issues with cuts? I think there were a couple, Charlie, right off the top that seemed obvious. And where did you go after that in terms of cuts?
2 clear ones for me that I didn't think twice about: Cody Ford and Oren Burks. Oren just not a fit for what they need in that linebacker room. I think he can play, but they need a different type of linebacker in that room. And then Cody, if he just can't play tackle anymore, I don't see how he fits on this team. I didn't cut BJ Hill because I think outside of John Franklin Myers, this defensive tackle class is awful. So just 2 cuts for me, and I kind of didn't really entertain any of the other ones.
Cody Ford and Oren Burks were very easy for me. Cutting Oren Burks reminded me that he played for the Bengals last year, which was nice. I also cut TJ Slayton.
Yeah.
I know we're going to do the full reveal later on, but Charlie's right. I mean, it's interesting, and you could say this maybe about a couple of different positions on defense. We all want an overhaul, or at least a lot of his fans want an overhaul. I found it harder to do than I thought, especially given how bad they were. I thought, like, hell, just blow these guys out and bring new guys in. It wasn't quite that simple. TJ Slayton, I just think, had a very forgettable season. Now, some of the possible replacements probably also had forgettable seasons, and this maybe isn't the most scientific way of looking at it. I'd rather take a chance on somebody who had a forgettable season somewhere else as opposed to somebody who had a forgettable season here. And so that number was big for me. I am not diametrically opposed to him being a Bengal next season. And I'm sure there was a world where if I would have included him on my sheet and then spent, made some cuts elsewhere, perhaps it could have worked. But I was looking to free, close to $10 to $11 million to accomplish what I wanted, which was starting caliber players all over the defense. And so TJ became expendable.
TJ's production last year is interesting. He ended up having a little bit more pass rush juice than I think we anticipated. And when he was on the feet, you did see the difference. If you look at his on-off splits on the numbers and sort of normal early downs, there was a significant difference in run defense when he was out there. But that 6.4 is a big number for a run-stopping nose who you're taking off of the field. I think there's probably a better chance than not than he stays, but this goes to, something Charlie, you and I talked about, is the DJ Reader paradox here. Are you just potentially maybe seeing if you can land DJ Reader and bring him back and cutting TJ Slayton and feel like you're adding a little bit more of a leadership, maybe a little bit more in overall play, even though he's older? Or is that not even an option that they're going to entertain? I think it's one of the interesting early portion of the offseason decisions to see if they have interest in looking at an upgrade, because I think you can get DJ Reader. I have him on here for 7. He's kind of a hard number to peg and how people will view him. Maybe you can get him for cheaper than that, given his age and his history. But if you can get him in essentially a 1-for-1, cut TJ Slayton and sign DJ Reader for the same amount of money, I could certainly see the Bengals doing that.
I'm all for that. Leadership is going to be a theme of my mock off season when I reveal that, and DJ might be the best leader that the defense has ever had. I haven't watched him yet and see really just how he stacked up in 2025. I would assume he's on a similar level as TJ Slayton, so I kind of just kept the youth there because I found some leadership elsewhere. But it will be a conversation if DJ is available in reality at a similar price point as TJ.
One other name that I ended up cutting because of, I think you're going to end up in a decision where is there an upgrade from BJ Hill, who you add 4.8 if you let him go. What was BJ Hill? Maybe the air, I think the air was in signing him last year rather than going a different direction, but they're on this number now. So you could add 4.8 against the cap. And to me, it's what I felt, and my major takeaway of all of the sheets was you just felt the scarcity at defensive tackle. Oh my God. There's nothing. There's nothing that you feel great about. So you understand holding on to BJ Hill and saying, we'll have to try some other options. John Franklin Myers is the only defensive tackle that is a significant upgrade, and he would be significant, but I have him on here for 17 mil. Very curious to see what his number ends up being because of the scarcity. He has picked the greatest year ever to be coming out of free agency, and maybe Denver does an extension or tags him and he doesn't even hit the market. It'll be fascinating, but I ended up in a world where I could get John Franklin Myers and I could pull that off. Then I let go of BJ Hill. So, but that would be kind of a 1-and-1 where once one would happen, I'd be willing to move on from the other and use that money to sign that guy. But outside of that, I'm with you guys. I think those are the cuts that make sense. The rest of it, I don't think you're doing this year.
I'll mention here what I mentioned to you on my show last week, Paul, which was I wish the team was in a better place that allowed me to cut Orlando Brown.
Yeah.
But I can't because now that's a big number attached to him. So you could do a lot with that. But the defense was so bad and they have to do so much work. I can't open up another hole at left tackle. In an ideal world, I get out in front of Orlando Brown's next season when the drop-off is probably going to at least continue, and you hope it doesn't accelerate. But there's always that fear, right? I mean, all season long, as the season unfolded, we started to talk about how good the offensive line was. But along with that, Orlando Brown may kind of be the weak link. That's an oversimplification. What I would love to be able to do is look at Orlando Brown and say, we're going to get out in front of you, kind of going through a steep drop-off, and we're going to find somebody else at left tackle, which means I'm going to use a first-round pick or I'm going to spend money on a premium free agent because of how the team is just filled with holes and things that I have to address. I don't want to open up another one. I don't want to create more uncertainty. But not that I did it. I do think it would have been fun, though, to take Orlando Brown and move him from LT to the cut column and then think about what you could do with that coin. At the end of the day, I simply didn't want to create a question at left tackle, so I kept him on the team.
I always go back to this with Orlando. Cole Van Lanen plays for the Jaguars, and frankly, I'd never heard of him until he got handed a contract extension a few weeks ago that pays him more than Orlando Brown Jr. And I hadn't heard of Cole Van Lanen because when the Jaguars played the Bengals in week 2, Van Lanen was a backup who played 5 special team snaps and was kind of a journeyman who ended up popping late. So just what it costs for that type of guy, Orlando, we talked about his decline, but it's still kind of a value based on how much you've seen the tackle market explode. And then I keep going back to the theme of leadership being something I'm investing a lot in this mock offseason.
That's going to be a theme as we go forward. One thing I want to just touch on briefly, and I'm happy having seen your sheets that I know neither of you guys did this, the Burrow restructure option is there. I think it's going to be an interesting talking point because I just put it, this could be any number, and it's very hard to pin down whether the Bengals would actually do it. If Burrow is still entertaining it, obviously he said last year he'd be willing to do whatever. If this is a kind of an all-in year, then maybe it's time to be an all-in team. And this is the year that you hit the button on a Burrow restructure that frees up 10, 15 million. We've certainly seen that in the past from other franchise quarterbacks. Teams use the big quarterback contract as a way to decide how much they want to spend. If there is somebody, that's where they can go to the well. There's always money in the Joe Burrow banana stand, so to speak. Like, you can go to it. So it's there as an option. I prefer doing this exercise knowing then what I could have done with it afterwards rather than actually going out there and doing it. I don't know, Charlie, if you have a feel on it. I'm fascinated to see, if there would be any willingness from a Bengals franchise that has never really had willingness to do this type of thing, to go into Burrow and be like, let's push a little bit more in on 26 with your deal.
The good news is that we have that clip from Burrow on Radio Row last year explaining to all of us what a restructure really is, so we know how he views it. But you've got this. You've got, you can see it on the bottom left, the trade Trey Hendrickson for a third. I didn't press that button either just because it's not something I see as realistic based on how the Bengals have handled all these situations in the recent past. Now, where I get stuck at the very end is I won't spoil it, there's one extension I don't get done that I want to get done. Could you use Burrow and that flexibility and say, hey, Joe, if we do this, we can get that other extension done? Like, that's exciting to me. Maybe that could be a scenario where you kind of are working in the same world there, but I don't see them, the extension world, I don't see them, they've just, correct me if I'm wrong, if they ever did it with Carson Palmer or Andy Dalton, restructuring a deal to just go even more all in on the free agent market.
No, I mean, it's not happening.
Just to show you, when I jotted down Burrow restructure on the bottom of my sheet here. So when I saw that, my eyebrows went up. And I thought to myself, that's going to be one of the first things I ask Paul about on my show. Yeah. Because I'm not sure anybody has entertained that. And maybe Joe Burrow himself is not going to entertain that. But there's a teaser ahead for 3:00 today because we've gone down so many different roads of possibilities this offseason. That's not one that I can recall anybody talking about.
No, but I mean, I think it's one that a team that is looking to go for it and seeing an opportunity in a division with all new coaches and an AFC that feels wide open and the continuity button right there. You can think of, as you're going through this, think about what $10-15 million could do for you when we start getting up against some of these decisions. Let's get to those decisions and let's start on defense. I mentioned earlier the scarcity at defensive tackle. Let's just talk through defensive line. Mo, I'll start with you. What did you do in the attempt to fix the defensive line, which is line 1A, B, and C probably for this team this offseason? How do you do it? Because there's a ton of different paths that you can go and very few that involve finding a premier interior pass rusher.
Yeah, so I'm using my most premier pick on a pass rusher, defensive lineman, and then looking ahead a little bit, I had a goal of 5 starting caliber free agents added to my defense, with 2 being on the defensive line. And so I'm going the 10th overall pick, 2 starting caliber players. I'm looking for guys who can get after the quarterback. I understand like leadership is going to be a big thing. I'm just looking for starting caliber players who I believe have more upside than the player that I cut and the guys that I'm sort of willing to move on from and Chris Jenkins and McKinley Jackson. So when I began my exercise, I started with just let's handle some simple stuff on offense, Reisner and Flacco. Cool. We're done there. Now the first real order of business is getting to work on the interior of that defensive line and knowing that if the draft falls my way, I'm using a guy who can get after the quarterback. What echoed for me the entire time is Duke Tobin saying, quote, pass rush is king. Like, all right, there was an hour of that press conference. But to me, if you had to walk away from that thinking about one thing, there's only one thing you can think about or write about or talk about or take to bed with you. It's pass rush is king. Great. Okay, so let's start there. That doesn't mean they're going to take an edge rusher. That doesn't mean they're going to prioritize, interior defensive linemen who can get after the quarterback. But pretty significant tell combined with what we saw from the team last year. So that's where I went to work. And it was, 2 starting caliber players and ideally the 10th overall pick on somebody who can get after the QB.
How about you, Charlie?
I remember a conversation we had during me and Paul during locker room clean out day where it was kind of towards the end. No one was really around, and we were looking around at the lockers. And I said, to me, the biggest question of this offseason is whether or not Miles Murphy is in that locker, the one that he currently is in, or the locker to his right, which is the premium corner locker, the Trey Hendrickson locker. And to me, that's all right. Do they get a defensive end one, or do they try to make this a room led by youth? That's kind of like what the Rams have done. It's something I'm probably going to change my mind back and forth with 10 times between now and the start of free agency. I've narrowed it down to like 4 guys I see as kind of 2021 Trey Hendrickson types, a hole in their game, but either a combination of traits or finish or winning experience, who you could see really kind of leading that room. I ended up going with what was behind door number 2. I signed Clavon Chason and went all in on the draft with a first-round pick at defensive end and a second-round pick at defensive tackle. That might be the wrong thing to do, but I went there as opposed to the big-ticket defensive end to keep enough money to address linebacker in the secondary, but then still made those premium investments in the draft.
Yeah, I'm with you. This becomes an interesting talking point, and I think this is one where I like the sheet to look at. Edge feels good in the draft. Edge feels good in free agency. I like the number of options that I see in that mid-level where we've seen the Bengals have some success in the past. And then obviously we know some of the names now, whether we're talking about the draft, whether we're talking about Reuben Bain or David Bailey, or some of the others that, there's a bunch of guys that seem like that might be the position that could be hanging around for the Bengals at 10. And knowing that, I liked the idea of, because you have Shamar. Like, I know he's the weird wild card here. What are you doing with Shamar Stewart? How are you viewing Shamar Stewart? Are you like betting on his upside? Are you watching what happened last year and like, we've got to make an insurance play here? Do you need that top guy, or do you just want a mix of Miles, Shamar, and another guy? I'm with you, Charlie. I like this mid group. I went through these names and there was a bunch of them. Draymond Jones is one that I really like because he's played in the division. He has versatility, which we know they value that. He can play edge. He can kick in and play certainly inside at a 3-tech or some sort of a pass rushing defensive tackle. He's done both in this league. I think you've seen him. He's going to give you a higher win rate than anybody you've had in there. I just think he's a nice piece that helps everyone. Especially if you have a draft that you don't know where it's going to go, you can kind of use Jones to go, okay, if you get Peter Woods and you like him, maybe Jones plays more outside. You get an edge, Reuben Bain falls in your lap, okay, maybe Jones is going to do a little bit more inside stuff for you. Whatever that is, I really like him, and he's one that I feel like is going to be at the top of their list because he makes a ton of sense with the way that Al likes to do defense. But beyond that, when you went down, whether it's, you mentioned Chason, I came back to Arnold Ebiketie from a guy on the rise, 4 years in Atlanta, top pick, high win rates, but kind of fell out of favor. They went with other guys, but he had a win rate over 20% last year, a win rate over 16% the previous year. You could see him being a guy that they like and change his scenery, somebody like that. There's 4 or 5 names. You mentioned, AJ Epinesa. You can go to Kwity Paye. You could bring back Joseph Osai if you wanted to. There's all these names in here, I think, that make sense, that probably won't crush it. And, it's not going to be a market where people are going to be dying because of the scarcity. That makes me say that a mid-range edge that you put into a 3-way mix with Shamar and Miles makes the most sense to fill out that part.
You make a great point with Shamar. Where I'm at with him and where I got a sense the building was at with Shamar at the end of the year was like, let's get someone who can definitely play over him but doesn't block him. If you went out and got Odafe Owe and then you have Miles Murphy, well, then there's not a lane as clear for Shamar to start. And it also kind of pigeonholes you in the draft a bit when the strength of what might be available to you at pick 10 might be defensive end. So I think you can kind of hedge your bet on defensive end a bit. I like using the word platoon at defensive end because no matter what, there's still going to be a role for individuals to shine with what their specific strengths are. Shamar using his size on the outside on early downs, rushing inside, add guys with specific strengths, build it kind of like a big league bullpen, and bank on your first round picks being guys who will get enough snaps to develop into that upside.
Let's talk a little bit about the interior defense then, because that becomes the question to me, right? Yeah, I mean, that's it. The question, and this is maybe why you would figure out where your start, and then be the first question that I have, looking at how you're going to approach this entire offseason. What's the plan here? Because they need to fix this. All right. I don't know if you guys saw this. Kevin Clark had this, and we've been talking about this ad nauseum here for years. They haven't had a real interior pass rusher since prime Geno Atkins, it feels. Top 4 in pressures from your tandem at defensive tackle this year. Top 4 teams were the last 4 teams remaining. Okay. Those were the top 4. There is a theme here. This is what the NFL is. Can you bring pass rush right into a quarterback's face? It disrupts everything. It throws off all the timing. It's so much a part of what the current NFL is. And those guys are hard to find, and maybe never harder than this offseason, which makes you regret not taking one into the super deep defensive tackle heavy draft last year, right? Because you'd love to have that guy entering year 2 jump that you could be shoving into an equation here right now, but they don't have that. You have whatever you think of TJ Slayton and BJ Hill. Peter Woods is going to be at the number 1 evaluation that everyone's going to want to know about from Clemson, because you see him now bumped down into the teens, even lower, as some of the experts kind of start dropping in their first mocks. But he's the only top 20 defensive tackle that I see. And as much as teams need those, someone's probably going to bank on that. Would it be the Bengals at 10? That's certainly an interesting conversation to have. And then there's John Franklin Myers and what that number is going to look like. Because after that, you're talking yourself into something, Charlie.
And I want to lead with this because John Franklin Myers, everyone's, he's kind of the Joe Tooney of this year's class, going back to a 2021 shout out. John Franklin Myers isn't Milton Williams. Like, Milton Williams was a perfect free agent. John Franklin Myers is a former 4th round pick, kind of a late breakout guy who wasn't even great until you drop him into maybe the best defensive line in football. When you get past him, frankly, the next best guy I see is Daquan Jones, who's 34 and had 4 quick pressures last year and wasn't a huge part of Buffalo's 3rd round plan. Like, what I'm worried about is if you talk yourself into one of these defensive tackles, you talk yourself into what I call the Sheldon Rankins splurge, where, and that was the word I remember using at the time, they splurged on Rankins and they were wrong and it went awfully. I have them drafting a defensive tackle. How do they fix this problem? Maybe they just don't this offseason. How do you work around that? Well, if it's not a defensive lineman, just give me the best playmaker I can find who can be around the ball, especially for a defense that, when I thought it was at its best last season schematically on 3rd downs, was those 3 defensive lineman looks. So even take a tackle off the field, put in a playmaker on the middle of the field who can blitz. This will be the first time I say the name Jaquan Brisker, but he's my ideal guy with that. I don't see how they solve the defensive tackle thing, so I'm opening up my search to any playmaker, even though pass rush is king.
So I have Daquan Jones on my sheet. One of the issues I struggled with across various areas of the defense was the age issue, right? Daquan, Charlie, as you mentioned, 34 years old. I am cautious when it comes to leaning too much into Pro Football Focus grades. He had a 72 Pro Football Focus pass rush grade this year. Slightly under 10% pass rush win rate. 2002 DJ Reader 70 Pro Football Focus pass rush. Pro Football Focus pass rush grade and a 12.2% pass rush win rate. So in terms of those metrics, there are some similarities there. He certainly doesn't sound like somebody who's interested in going back to Buffalo. I got to think at this stage in his career, he's only looking for situations where he can maybe win. I think he provides what I'm looking for. So I added two. Again, I was looking for starting caliber players up front. I added Daquan Jones and I added Logan Hall. Logan Hall this year in Tampa Bay had a drop-off from what he was in 2024. He was still in the upper quarter in terms of pressures among interior defensive linemen. I think 32nd out of 134, if I could read my crappy handwriting. Kind of a bargain, perhaps, because he didn't have a great 2025. So I'm sort of leaning into, hey, change of scenery can be the player that he was 2 seasons ago. But even in a year where he is regarded to have been, regarded to have dropped off, I'm getting a guy who was all right, at least at putting pressure on the quarterback. The overall sacks number did drop from 5.5 to 1.5. That number, 1.5 sacks, has not precluded the Bengals from adding players to their team before. It shouldn't here. So I added 2 guys. I think that the draft conversation about dudes on the interior of the defensive line is going to be fascinating because, of sort of what you just outlined there, really being a guy at number 10 that they could take. And then, obviously we'll talk about later rounds as today unfolds and as the ensuing weeks unfold, but I'm leaning on experience. I took 2 guys and I spent a total of $14 million to get them. So I felt pretty comfortable about that.
A couple JFM, John Franklin Myers stuff here. Like, he has had 5 straight years of 50 or more pressures before this year, but he had 43. But again, you talked about him being dropped in Denver, where it's just everyone was coming from everywhere. I mean, he has consistently gotten pressure. He's consistently had solid win rates. That's going to be appealing to teams, just that alone, right? And when there isn't any of that. The last time the Bengals had anybody with, 40 plus pressures in a season was like 2023 BJ Hill, who narrowly got over into 40. Like, they just haven't had that type of a player. So the upgrade from what they currently have, where every defensive tackle was in the single digit win rate, and then going to someone who's going to be traditionally up around 15% or whatever, is significant when you're talking about the fact that they just haven't really had that. So it could make sense going for it there. If something, maybe his market doesn't end up being as big as we think. That's the big fish that you're talking about. Outside of that, I'm very happy that Levi Onwuzurike is back, Charlie.
Yes.
He's back. 1 year later, after injury just totally wiped out his year, he can be your pass rushing specialist 3-tech that you bring in special situations. He can play more. Who knows? He's a wild card in terms of, he was kind of an analytic darling. Does he just go back to Detroit? Can they just throw $5 million at him and see what happens? He could be interesting. But again, Logan Hall was a late bloomer. Like, the Bengals liked him in the draft that year. All of these names, you're talking yourself into something. You don't feel solid about it, but there's probably that's what this is going to have to be realistically, is some kind of a risk on one of these guys that you're hoping that blossom when they come to Cincinnati, because you're counting on your personnel staff to knock out that eval and see something.
What I have on my mock offseason, and I won't spoil the whole thing yet, but I just kept Slayton at nose, BJ Hill at defensive tackle, and then I used my second round pick to get a guy there. And then, of course, you'd have Jackson and Jenkins and whatever other guy you probably add into the mix on a bargain deal as your room. I feel like that's okay enough, and I don't feel like I have to talk myself into any of those investments as opposed to feeling like personally, and you guys, disagree with a different viewpoint. I feel like I'd have to talk myself more into Daquan Jones or Levi Muzarike, who we loved last year, but is now coming off another major injury for him. So I see too much risk there that I'm just going to take what the board's giving me at other positions and hope you can be like the 2021 Bengals and win despite not having enough interior pass rush.
Yeah, and Chris Jenkins still hangs out there as a former second-round pick who, what are you going to get? I don't know. Is that who he is? Does he have a year 3 Miles Murphy type thing in him? At the very least, you have to assume, despite the scarcity, competition is going to be in the mix for BJ Hill, for Chris Jenkins, whether it's a first-round pick in Peter Woods, whether it's a second-round pick, whether it's a mid-level free agent shot. Something's going to get in the mix in there, and they'll have to. That's going to be the question, is what that looks like, because they need more. Because like you said, you can start moving, or you can use Shamar inside more. You can use a guy like Jermaine Jones, and like they're going to have to get creative. Three guys rushing, whatever it is. This problem is not going to be easily solved, and it's going to require creative solutions. Like, is there some way to make a trade for somebody? Is whatever that is. That's the hardest problem of the entire offseason is what that's going to end up looking like in terms of interior pass rush. Let's get to linebacker. I thought, guys, that this drop down made me happiest. Like, this was, hey, I see like 6 guys that fit what I'm looking for here in this middle range. I don't need to go to the top to Quay Walker or Devin Lloyd or Devin Bush. I want a veteran with skins on the wall, knows the hell he's doing, to be the, as Mike Hodges would call it, the caddy for my 2 young linebackers to see what happens there. Maybe they get better, maybe they don't, but bring me in a starter. I see a bunch of them. Bobby Wagner, Demario Davis, Caden Ellis, Leo Chenal, Alex Anzalone, Levante David, Alex Singleton, was a big story this weekend for Denver. Like, even down to Matt Milano, who's played a ton for Buffalo. Like, these are all guys that fit the bill at a non-premium position. I feel like free agency this year sets up to hit the Bengals where they would like, to get a veteran linebacker to give you your leadership. So it's so much a part of what they're looking for. Calm down things for your young linebackers and still leave room for them to grow and evolve next to. You take your pick for me on who you like here. And I don't know, Mo, what you thought, but like, to me, I loved seeing all of these names that kind of fit the profile of what you're looking for at linebacker.
Easiest decision I had. The first name you mentioned was who I looked for first on the drop down. That was Bobby Wagner. And yeah, man, he's 1,000 years old. Dude can still play. I'm looking for somebody that I could tell, even though I have neither on my sheet. I'm looking for somebody that I could tell, Barrett Carter and Demetrius Knight, attach yourself to that guy. Like, with Bobby Wagner, he's going to be in position. He's not going to make mistakes. There's nothing that another team's offense hasn't shown him. He also played at a really high level last year for Washington. Leadership, check. Production, check. Somebody those 2 guys can learn from, check. Somebody that Al Golden can drop into the middle of his defense and feel like mistake is never going to be made, check. Sure tackler, check. Like, the only thing to not like is the age, and his production has defied the age. And so maybe there will be a little bit of a drop off, but okay, if by him being on the team, the other dudes grab onto something and improve because of it, I can live with it. This was the easiest one for me. And there was at one point I went through this exercise and I had like nothing but old players, and Daquan Jones is 34 years old. So I was not immune to really leaning into age, but Bobby Wagner at that position for me was the no-brainer of no-brainers. Matt Milano is also somebody that I considered and cost less if my memory serves correct in this exercise. But he has been somebody I've been thinking about now for weeks. Like, okay, if I am not shelving the idea of either Knight or Carter helping this team moving forward, I need somebody they could just attach themselves to and can still play. that to me defines Bobby Wagner. So he was an easy ad for me in this exercise.
It's a term that I enjoyed coming up with last offseason, the Josh Bynesification of the Bengals defense. And I know he's gone now, but talk to Logan Wilson about what Josh Bynes meant for him in his career. And Logan doesn't become the player he did in 2021 and 2022 without that. Next, you look at how the Bengals approached free agency and the little they did do last year, and it ended up being a lot of guys. Oh, TJ Slayton played for Jerry Montgomery. Oh, Oren Burks knew this coach. This guy knew that coach. The beauty is a lot of those linebackers you mentioned, Paul, have such specific Bengals connection. Heck, 2 of them were drafted by Mike Hodges. So I go to Caden Ellis out of Atlanta. Great missed tackle rate. Captain. Makes plays, stuff like that. I don't need playmaking. I don't need coverage ability. I need someone who can literally call the plays, who can make the tackles, and who can run at a fullback and go, and then hit him in the face. That's all I'm looking for at that position, and you've got a bunch of good options on the board.
Demario Davis is one that obviously stands out. Whether he would leave New Orleans is probably the question, or what he wants to do. I mean, I think Mike Hodges would talk about him for hours he was the guy in his room there that was just the leader that taught everybody everything. There would be an extreme comfort, and maybe a coach like Hodges is the only reason someone like Demario Davis would even consider, playing the tail end of his career in Cincinnati instead of where he's built this home and this career life or whatever. Wagner makes more sense in that regard, in that he has bounced around. You could see him maybe bouncing around one more time. But yeah, you're right. These matches, there's a couple more in there even. I'm fine with anybody in that middle range because they all kind of fit the bill of knowing what they're doing. Pick whatever they like. I'm with you. I don't have a problem with the fact that Wagner, Davis, even Levante David, like these guys are in their mid-30s. They were productive last year, and that's more than we can say for most Bengals linebackers. Let's move on. All right, cornerback. We didn't even do anything other than, do you want to extend DJ Turner and Dax Hill? It's not going to be something that really impacts you this year. So for the sheet, it's easy to hit the 2 million plus or whatever. This would be more of a next year and the year after type thing when you start talking about who you're building around. I don't think anybody has a problem building around DJ Turner and Dax Hill. They feel like 2 guys that you should want to build around. I understand corners come young and you don't know what you're going to get when guys do start to get older or get money or whatever. I feel very comfortable saying that Dax Hill and DJ Turner are made of the right stuff, and I'd be more than willing to do extensions with either of them quickly. Did you guys have any strong feelings on those 2 guys either way?
The only drop down that I wish would have been included was extension after 9 months of haggling over it and about 4 months of me getting talk show topics and hold-ins. And if we could get a cryptic tweet or 2 and then an agent does an interview, come on, it's not a Bengals offseason if they don't somehow make the easy more complex. And that's the only thing I would have added.
This is a part of the immersive video game experience that I'm pitching. There are actually multiple Mo and Paul Tuesday segments embedded as a part of the experience.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that. That's what we need. It's in the game. All right. Fascinating here. Fascinating conversation. Future of the NFL. What we saw and all these teams playing these past couple of weekends. This slot nickel star position added new this year to the sheet, as it has been this trend of the NFL, the Kyle Hamilton, the Jalen Petrie, the Nicky Manwari that was added last year by Seattle. This guy he's playing everything. He's covering in the nickel. You're in a 3 safety set. He can drop back. There's a million different things you can do with them. So you go into this spot now, slot safety, and you can find slot corners. You can find safeties. You can find straight corners. They're all in there, and you can pick which way that you kind of want to go. A few names that you're familiar with. Charlie, you have written about this on your chalkboard. I hope people are getting the chalkboard. They should be. Give me your take on the Bengals and the rest of the safety and the slot position in terms of what you think the approach should or could be here.
I've got a list of about 10, 12 defensive backs around the league who are quote unquote safeties. Like we know Minkah Fitzpatrick, he's a safety. Grant Delpit, he's a safety. All 12 of them ranked in the top 30 in snaps out of the slot this season. when you look at kind of the trend around the league offensively, has been teams trying to throw out of 12 and 13 personnel more. And the Bengals were kind of an early adapter of that with Mike Gesicki. He was kind of their numbers breaker. Oh, do you match him with a corner? Do you match him with a safety? Do we get another linebacker on the field? This is a big headache that every team has to solve every week. And now you're seeing the smartest defenses counter that with this big nickel type. Just think Nick Eamon-Worry. He's going to get a lot of buzz for being that kind of guy. The key is that's a guy who can stick his nose in, fit the run, take on a tight end block, and also make a play over the middle of the field. Look at the 2024 Bengals defense under Lou Anarumo. They weren't even sniffing any of that. Geno Stone led the league in free safety snaps. They had true slot corners. Al Golden started to dip his toe into that direction in 2025, moving Stone, battle around more. Dax when he was in the slot. The one thing Geno Stone did well was blitz, and imagine if we got a real guy doing that. So I think the signs point to the Bengals trying to find a playmaker in this role. And because I'm not having them take a defensive tackle, I'm leaving some money to make a bit of a bigger splurge at this spot.
There's options there. There's a few that you could throw around. You're not going to find necessarily a Nick Eamon-Worry, but what you can do, you can bring back Jalen Davis, who's going to be a lower number. There's nothing big, but he did solidify you last year, and know that you have that. And then let's talk about it. Safety, round 1, Caleb Downs could be slotted right in there as he shows up into your slot safety position. And then you can sign more of you could do exactly what the Ravens did in trading for Alohi Gilman, right? You could sign a guy like that in the mid-range. And then Caleb Downs is your Kyle Hamilton, where now you're playing those 3 guys along with Jordan Battle out here all together. And now you feel like you're cooking a little bit. You're letting Caleb Downs do a lot of what he did at Ohio State, which is be a playmaker and be a little closer to the ball, even though he can do more than that. That could be a spot where you could see him thriving.
You could even do both, because if you get let's just say Brisker and Downs, one can be your slot, one can be your safety. Now you're really cooking. This now becomes identity stuff of a defense.
I'm fascinated by this. I think this is the most interesting because safety, are the Bengals going to spend big at safety? History says no. And probably at one of these positions, they're going to skimp, whether we're going to talk about Dalton Risner here in a second, or at safety, or maybe it is at linebacker. I doubt it's going to be defensive line. That feels like pass rushers king is going to be the conversation. But maybe this is it. Maybe it's cheap at safety again, and you got to be talking about something lower. But if that also involves being willing to go after somebody like Caleb Downs, if he is there at 10, non-premium position, we know that's been something that's kept them away before. Sure feels like maybe in the new NFL, it's becoming a premium position. And what will that mean for Caleb Downs' draft stock? Which, by the way, culture setter, leadership, all that stuff, check big in every major way with him. So certainly his conversation around how they feel about him, in the same way we said, how do you feel about Peter Woods, could drive some of where they're willing to go in free agency, to think that one of those two maybe would or would not be available to them, or how interested they would be in it.
I did a search for safety and chess piece. And then I did a search for safety and Swiss Army knife. Now, I don't know if one can have both. But Kamari Ramsey from USC, when I did that search, he popped up the most for both searches. So my approach was a little bit different. Number one, I had to replace Geno Stone. This was cathartic. So how was I going to replace Geno Stone? Again, this is me wearing a Cincinnati football hoodie. Today I got an email from the University of Cincinnati. I'll see if I can quickly pull it up. And it says, Kobe Bryant leads Seahawks to Super Bowl. What else do you need? Okay.
What else do you need?
What else do you need? He led them to the Super Bowl. Kobe Bryant was drafted as a corner, played corner at UC, famously was like the guy that teams threw to because they didn't throw Sauce's direction, and Kobe was awesome in that role. Like one of my all-time favorite players for 2 reasons. One, he understood all the hype Sauce was getting, never expressed a moment of resentment, never expressed a moment of jealousy, was awesome. Number 2, you would watch the Bearcats and go, well, they're not going to throw his way, so they're probably going to throw his way. And he answered the bell every single time. At safety in Seattle, he has been terrific. Is this the likely outcome? No, for the reasons you just outlined. They're unlikely to make a big free agent splash at safety. But emotionally, not only do I get a chance to not have a spreadsheet with Geno Stone on it, I get a chance to replace him with one of my all-time favorites. Are you kidding me? Yes, I'm doing that with Kobe Bryant, a player who I will say the same thing about that a lot of people said about Geno Stone when the Bengals signed him after his 4 years with Baltimore. The more you asked him to do, the more he did. And I think that fits Kobe's description in Seattle. So he is going to be my safety. And then I could play him at corner if I need to, because he has played extensively there at the professional level. And then I'm drafting a Swiss Army knife. I kind of operated under the assumption, and this is maybe foolish to do because of positional value, but if Caleb Downs is genuinely a top 3 player in this draft, and people all over the place will say that he is, and if the way he plays in his position sort of marks the future of the NFL, let's operate under the assumption he is not there. Now, beyond this spreadsheet, there is nobody who watched him at Ohio State last season who wouldn't do cartwheels if they took him with the 10th overall pick. For all the reasons you guys just outlined, I kind of went a different direction and said, all right, let's say he's not there. I'm going to use the 10th overall pick on Ruben Bain. By the way, who didn't watch the national title game and salivate over the possibility of him wearing a Bengals helmet? And then, all right, I need somebody who's maybe not Caleb Downs, but can do a lot of the same things. I'm not going to pretend that I've watched Kamari Ramsey tape, but based on what I've read, all right, I'm happy with that. And then I added Kobe Bryant, and Geno Stone's not here anymore. And I enjoyed doing that very, very much.
While I have them doing real quick, while I have them doing kind of a bit more, I mean, your Pathmo works 100%. You look at, like, obviously Nicky Manwari, but like Billy Bowman, a guy who we really like, Paul and I, as a free safety prospect last year. Atlanta just threw him in the slot, and he balled out. He was like a third, fourth round pick. So you can also shape your identity with just an athletic rookie.
Yeah. And Kamari Ramsey last year played 295 snaps in the slot. So he will be listed as a safety, but like there's pretty extensive slot experience. So this was obviously the position group, the secondary that I was most excited about. And so I'm pretty happy with what I've done.
See where I think there's a possibility for that fourth corner to be somebody who's kind of a veteran. I know we've mentioned Chidobe Awuzie here before, somebody who can kind of come in, maybe be a veteran that's played, but you're not going to ask them to play a ton early unless there's injury. Maybe they spent some money in there. But outside of that, I think you're right. I think it's an interesting path. And you kind of see the letting these guys stick around on the defensive line and then adding in, whether it's some kind of draft picks or something smaller and supplemental, could be the way you get to everything that we just talked about. Let's very quickly run through the offense, which is a little much simpler, right? Like you're going to be talking about backup quarterback, I guess, and what that looks like. I don't know. Sam Howell, Jimmy Garoppolo, Keenum. I think pick a name here. Flacco's not going to sign immediately. Maybe he does down the road. We've discussed the Flacco situation in the past, so I'm not going to dive deep into that. Let's just throw Sam Howell in here as 2.5.
Whichever guy had the most high school passing yards.
Yes, is where you want to go. It's where you want to go on that one. Probably Garoppolo. And that's, you just get the double model, Burrow and Garoppolo together. Let's go to Reisner. I think everyone's hoping that Dalton Reisner happens. At least that's the conversation that you've had. It feels like you can do that. And okay, now we're starting to see a red thing up here, which you don't love as much, but I think it shows you're pretty close to the area. The rest of it, do you guys do anything with wide receiver 3? That's the obvious, it feels like you're trying to do too much if you're messing around with wide receiver 3 right now.
I took a look because I was interested in who some of the lower priced free agents were. And in none of them was I like, you know what, substantial upgrade from a guy who's been in the system for a while that Joe Burrow has a level of comfort with. And so I didn't do anything. And I will say this on offense, the one thing that I didn't wrestle with as much on this sheet, but that I've thought a lot about is Chase Brown and an extension. And that feels like almost an entirely different conversation But like, this was the first time that I was confronted with like, boy, do I really want to do that right now? Do I really want to prioritize that? I didn't, but I think there's interesting discussions about what to do there. But getting back to your original question, I left Andre Yoshivas alone. I left Mike Gesicki alone. I left, I'm sure all three did, most of the offense alone.
My wide receiver 3 take is recent Bengals history shows us exactly what they're going to do. They've told us they would love to have a receiver with Jermaine Burton's skill set. I call it the idea of Burton. So if that guy's available on day 3, or the next Yosevach, your classic traitsy heptathlete from a small school who could sit for a year and then grow into something more. But to me also, that would just be kind of a day 3 conversation as opposed to free agency.
Yeah, I think that's where I don't think wide receiver shows up until round 4 for sure. And that is maybe it. It's just that simple of who is the next Yosevach to eventually replace him or maybe potentially get into the mix by the end of this year. I don't see them spending money on that, as fun and enticing as that would be. And I'm sure James is beating that drum right now. But I don't see that fitting into this year's puzzle. Tackle, I think that this is where you have the conversation for real at 10 is drafting the tackle. And so, if you look at, okay, I'm going to consider tackle in the first round. I mean, we know some of these names are real. And so if that is, one of these top tackles, it falls down and is still available at 10, I think you'd have to consider it. More than likely, you're probably taking somebody who's a little bit more of a project. That would be a second round type guy. So we go to second round tackles and you're looking, okay, here's a couple of names in here according to the PFF board. You throw them in there, whatever. I don't know much about Jennings Dunker at this point. I'm sure we will. But that to me is what the solve is here, is you have somebody there that you put in the mix, and that the idea being they're ready next year, but they could come in. If you're a second round pick, you're a guy that played at Iowa, you could probably come in this year if something were to happen to Amarius Mims or Orlando Brown Jr., hypothetically.
I found a guy, a day 2 guy. I know nothing about these prospects right now. Isaiah World. He's 6'8", and his last name is World. I mean, that's all you need, right? Like,
there it is.
got to get around World.
So I had him taking him in the 3rd round. 6'8", and his name is World. Literally all I needed to know.
That's it.
Same here.
We know they have a type. So
yes.
I think we kind of did it a little bit on this fake sheet. But for that fact, let's quickly let you guys talk through your sheets that you officially did come up with. All right, Mo, here is your sheet. I'm comfortable with it. You've talked through most of this. Mm-hmm. There's Isaiah World in there hanging out. I like it. I like what you did here.
Well, getting a pick for Trey Hendrickson is probably a little bit ambitious, but if he's the best free agent on the market, and many evaluators will still list him as one of the 2 best free agents on the market, shouldn't I at least entertain what I might be able to do if I tag him and trade him? I don't know. So in my imaginary world, I did.
Yeah,
probably a little ambitious. We talked extensively about Bobby Wagner. I also added Quincy Williams. Quincy Williams fell out of favor in a big-time way with the Jets this year, which has probably significantly reduced what his asking price is going to be. He has talked a lot about, I need to go find the right scheme. In the right scheme, I'm going to ball out. A lot of folks have said, well, he'll go back and play for Robert Saleh. Maybe he will. But all I hear from Al Golden is, hey, Al's got the right scheme. Cool. Let's get Quincy Williams for $5 million, maybe a little bit of a bargain, and let's just totally say F it at linebacker, plus draft a guy in Jacob Rodriguez in round 4, and make Barrett Carter and Demetrius Knight legitimately have to earn it against what I've done at linebacker. I think everything else we've done, we've kind of gone through and talked about here. But I walked away from it. My goal was I wanted 5 starting caliber players on defense. I have added 5 starting caliber players on defense. I will admit this. I extended DJ Turner. I didn't extend Dax Hill. That was a little bit more of a blind oversight than anything else. Nobody, I think, is going to be upset if they figure out a way to extend both. But I guess if I would have extended Dax, that could have gotten in the way of me accomplishing what I wanted to. And again, when I sat down, my first goal was I want five starting caliber players on defense, and that's what I got.
I like it. Let's bring Charlie, your sheet in here. Talk me through what you've got.
Yeah, I kind of wrote down 1 through 9, kind of the order I did it. 1, I wanted to eliminate offseason distractions and reward top 10 players at their position. So right away, I got the deals done with Chase Brown and DJ Turner. And the spoiler alert, the end is my biggest regret in this exercise is not getting Dax done. But he hasn't played a full year out wide, not a top 10, 15 guy yet. So I held off on that. 2, backup quarterback, Case Keenum, holds the FBS record for passing completions. 3, I just ran it back on offense. Keep it as simple as you can so you focus on the D. Number 4, the DE1 versus DE2 question. My next move was signing Chase on to complement the rookies, bring some speed, add a production element while still providing enough runway for the young guys. 5, give me a defensive playmaker regardless of position. Since that wasn't going to be defensive tackle, I went right to Jaquan Brisker, who basically you could, if you wanted, list him as the slot and put him constantly around the ball, and he can blitz too. Then I cut Oren Burks and Cody Ford. Then I made sure to add a veteran linebacker who I trusted to stabilize the middle of the defense. Caden Ellis, I talked about how much I liked him. Not 2, because in my evaluation, I saw enough for Knight and Carter to be a part of packages and roles while still giving them the runway to grow into starters. 8, build up the defensive line in the draft. It was my first-round pick on an edge. That feels right to me. Second-round pick at defensive tackle. So you've still got now a defensive line you've invested a ton in. Just for me, it was draft picks as opposed to free agency. So I've built up the line. Wingard's a sleeper for me. He's kind of the Josevach of defensive backs. Put him at safety when you need Brisker around. Put him in the box if you need some help there. Leader, he'll do just enough. And then again, I regret not getting the Dax Hill done. But honestly, I think this is a league average defense.
Yeah. And that's all you need, Mo. Did you know? That's all you need. Don't forget it.
Have anything here to impale myself with? No. You're right. It's a league average defense is probably good enough.
Okay. In this world where I can get John Franklin Myers for $17 million, I'm doing it. I don't see any other path to an interior defender that can actually disrupt the game. And maybe him at 17 is like getting Trey Hendrickson at that number back in 2021. And that's my answer to that. I got a Ebiketie in here for 7, and on down Alex Singleton made sense to add as one of those many of linebackers, and sticking again, same as you with Knight and Carter. I did get Dax, but not DJ, because Dax, I think they could probably even work his salary because he has a bigger number in the 5th-year option this year. There's a possibility of still getting a deal done with DJ Turner next year, dealing with franchise tags and all that stuff. So maybe they want to see another year of him actually playing. Either way, did get that one done to keep him. Caleb Downs was my first-round pick, and then I threw another pick in there at CB4. Ended up doing the Gilman strategy of having Downs with Gilman and Battle and kind of using that as a 3 safety rotation back there. And then, kept Reisner. I have a 2nd-round pick at tackle to kind of be the next guy, hopefully, for them down the line. And I ended up cutting BJ Hill to make that happen, but that was the BJ Hill for John Franklin Myers move. So that was mine. I don't know who's right or who's wrong, but I think we solved all their problems today. And I'm excited about that.
And we didn't even have to do special teams this year.
No, we didn't. Isn't that nice? So much easier. So much easier for us.
My one other thing here is when I did this, and I did it yesterday afternoon after shoveling, which was fun. Miles Murphy was terrific toward the end of the season. I'm not giving up on Shamar Stewart, and I love Ruben Bain. And when I printed it out and I looked at like those 3 guys, and I thought of the best case scenario for all 3, I'm going to be unblockable next year. Plus the additions I've made inside. So Duke Tobin says pass rush is king. I'm your queen. I don't even know if that makes sense, but there you go.
Wow.
Add that to the list of roles that you have offered to play.
Sure.
For the Cincinnati Bengals. We're going to
I got a $1.1 million to pay me to be their director of common sense.
Yeah.
So the guy that Sean Payton could have used going, coach, Winter storm's coming. Take those 3 points. That guy, 1.1 for all the sideline gear they're going to buy me. No.
That's chump change. Hardly cost anything.
I wonder who the forecast guy is on the Bengals staff. You know?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Well,
maybe that's what Steve Horsemeyer's doing in his retirement now. Maybe he moonlights as a Bengals Blizzard consultant.
You're not allowed to have a phone, I guess, on the sideline, right? But like you should be allowed to have somebody who's just like, coach. Like you see it in baseball where they think the weather is going to come and they're all huddling around the radar. Just, coach, we made, why don't you take those points? It's going to be swirling. They're going to be superimposing the yard lines on TV here soon.
You know what? Seriously, my biggest criticism of the game was when Denver tried to kick that game-tying field goal that got blocked. They did a poor job clearing the spot where they put the ball. They did nothing to try to.
Where's the snowblower people?
Right. Yes. It would have been the ultimate payback for the Patriots doing that in like 1970, whatever, right? When they did that, I think, against the Dolphins. There was an opportunity. An opportunity
missed. Guys, this was great. Thank you for sharing so much of your time here today, going extra on Sheets Day. I certainly appreciate it. And I'll just take this and send this link directly to Duke Tobin and the Bengals front office. And you're welcome. Solved all the problems. So it's good stuff. All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.